Looking through the collections of the National Museum of Wales, I became interested in a particular wooden spoon. It's a cawl spoon. It was hand-carved for a specific purpose. Cawl spoons have a wide, ovular bowl, which is good for sipping soup. Cawl is a simple bacon and vegetable stew. It was the most common element of the diet of the rural Welsh poor. I want to ask the question, how might the aesthetics of this wooden spoon contribute to an understanding of rural Welsh identity in the 19th century? To answer this question, we have to do material culture history. Material culture is a document for historians to use. It's objects that the past left behind. Material culture history is most useful to learn about people who didn't leave behind written sources, but did leave behind the everyday objects and items that they made and used. Material culture historian Karen Harvey gives us a useful specification of this concept. Unlike object or artifact, material culture encapsulates not just the physical attributes of an object, but the myriad and shifting contexts through which it acquires meaning. Material culture is not simply objects that people make, use, and throw away. It's an integral part of, and indeed shapes, human experience. A wooden spoon is material culture. Before the advent of mass manufacture, they were made by individuals for a social purpose, for eating, display, or simply for the enjoyment of the craft. As Harvey notes, objects are embedded in a social world and as such can provide a distinctive entry point to that world. The cawl spoon will be my entry point to everyday items and eating in rural 19th century Wales. My approach is to firstly place the spoon in its context, secondly to study its aesthetic features, and finally to explain how developing a replica of the object is key to what the historian may learn. Where I found it, in the online collections of a museum, a wooden spoon is very much decontextualized. To my mind, a wooden spoon belongs on a rack or in a drawer, in use and serving its particular function. Some material culture history seeks to make this connection between how and where an object was made and its current situation. This story about the object, the people who used it, where it ended up, is what makes it material culture. This spoon was carved sometime in the 19th century by John Jones, from the village of Dinas Mawddwy in mid-Wales. John Jones was an accomplished spoon carver in addition to his trade as a carpenter. 9 of his spoons are contained in the National Museum of Wales collection. The museum's description of the cawl spoon is anecdotal. It says, "Broth spoons were by far the most popular, and to make them wee called for a high degree of skill. They had to be well balanced, light, deep enough to hold a mouthful of broth, and yet fit comfortably in the mouth. The lip had to be thin, but thicker towards the back where the handle joined the bowl, and extra strength was needed. Ideally, the back of the handle would curve gracefully upwards. Flat spoons were considered to be the worst, and were viewed with contempt by skilled makers." The wooden spoon is ideal as an object of material culture study insofar as it synthesizes craftsmanship, function, and aesthetics. The cawl spoon was overwhelmingly a humble item for everyday eating. Here are 3 examples of other cawl spoons from the museum's collection that may have been viewed with contempt by skilled makers. The handles are straight compared to the graceful curves of Jones's cawl spoon, and the bowls of the spoons are also somewhat thick and crude in comparison. The 2 spoons on the right display evidence of the kind of quotidian function that I've described. The deep brown discoloration, or patina, on the bowl of the spoons, and the cracks at the rear of the bowl are signs of age. Jones's spoon lacks this patina, indicating that it was either unused or decorative, or was exceptionally well taken care of. Either way, we can see a distinction here between an everyday spoon and a finely made one. Material culture history is a methodology that lends itself well to an interdisciplinary approach. In his discussion of 19th century pottery finds in rural Clydach Valley, South Wales, archaeologist Alastair Brooks notes that the more expensive imported porcelain and domestic transfer printed ceramics were found only in the form of plates and teas, which are cups and saucers, whereas bowl finds, used for cawl, the daily diet of rural Wales, were exclusively made from lower cost ceramics. He came to the inference that Welsh behaviour, as represented by the inexpensive cawl bowls, was perceived as low status, while wider British culture, identity and ideology, as represented by porcelain teas and, to a lesser extent, transfer printed plates, was high status. This dichotomy is interesting to my discussion of wooden cawl spoons, as I argue that the maker John Jones translated a low-status, everyday, and consequentially unremarkable object into an example of fine craftsmanship. We will read the aesthetic features of Jones's spoon as evidence of a high degree of time, care, and skill in the making of this typically Welsh object. As a spoon carver and historian, the features that most piqued my interest in Jones's cawl spoon were the tool marks left on the surface. Because the original maker chose not to sand the spoon smooth, these marks tell the story of how the spoon was carved, and they display his skill and expertise. In her essay, Time, Wear and Maintenance, The Afterlife of Things, Victoria Kelly talks about the concept of trace as marks of time and use. She shows how evidence of care and maintenance contribute to the story that an object is able to tell. Here, I offer a sort of backwards expansion of that concept, that certain objects also keep a trace of how they were made, how they came to be, and the hand of the original maker. For the historian, the key to unlocking this embedded information is to put oneself in the shoes of the original maker and to learn their skills. Amiria Hannah does this when she relays an anecdote regarding her study of Maori cloaks in New Zealand. She says, although the cloaks were often lacking in documentation, the movements of the weaver's hands were still there, embodied in the fabric of the cloak, and therefore available to us long after the weaver had died. The only way to learn a manual and aesthetic skill like spoon carving is by doing. I argue that anyone who approaches material culture from the perspective of learning the skills of the original maker can appreciate this communication across time, with objects that want to tell us about how they were made and who made them. Jones's spoon was carved using few simple tools and a green woodworking approach. Some surviving examples in the National Museum of Wales collection show us the tools of the 19th century Welsh spoon carver, but Jones's spoon itself can also show how it was made. Jones would have started with a log or a branch from a recently felled tree. Green wood that was recently felled with a high moisture content, is much easier to carve with edge tools such as knives and axes as compared to seasoned timber. He would have almost certainly used an axe or hatchet to roughly carve out the shape of the spoon, as the mass and chopping motion of the axe makes it the most efficient tool. The motions of the fine work can be read in the facets, or tool marks, left on the spoon. On the handle of the spoon, we can see that these facets are long, narrow, and straight. It is likely that Jones braced the bowl of the spoon against his chest and drew the knife from the tip of the spoon's handle towards himself to remove a fine and consistently straight shaving while working with the grain, that is, in the direction in which the tree grew. On the back side of the handle, the opposite is true. He would have cut from the bowl towards the handle. Conversely, the tool marks in the bowl of the spoon show us that Jones worked across the grain, perpendicular to the growth of the tree, using a hooked knife to hollow out the bowl. To achieve shape and a fine finish without using sandpaper, Jones made many fine and shallow cuts. Similarly, on the back of the bowl of the spoon, we can see that Jones worked across the grain and developed continuous facets. These are evidence of his skill as a carver. This green wood carving approach requires time and expertise. To achieve a satisfactory finish on the surface of the wood requires one's tools to be kept very sharp and knowledge of how to read the grain of the wood to make cuts that do not chip, tear, or split the wood fibres. To conclude, the level of expertise and care that the original maker put towards this cawl spoon shows that he placed a high cultural value on this typically Welsh and everyday item. Unlike the cawl bowls found in the Clydach dig, and unlike the other examples of cawl spoons in the museum, Jones's spoon could not be said to be low status. So why did he make such a fine spoon for the exclusive purpose of eating cawl, a humble and typically Welsh food? I read it as a valorization of rural Welsh identity.